Cool. Okay, well, welcome to our panel. Thank you so much for coming. Today we just are here to talk about engaging millennial and Gen Z collectors. And as a young gallerist, as a gallery that supports mostly emerging artists, it's something super important to me, figuring out who's going to be the next generation of collecting. And I think it's also something that Future Fair is really engaged with as well, as a young fair with kind of like the energy of excitement and newness. So Rachel, I'll start maybe our first question with you, if I could, which is to what extent and in what ways do you see millennials and Gen Zs participating in the current market?
I feel really passionate about these two generations becoming art patrons, and it's been really exciting to see a lot of even Gen Z. I think Gen Z, for a lot of people in our communities, there's a surprising to see such young people being art patrons and art buyers. I actually live in Los Angeles. I've been living there for the last 2 years, and in preparation for our conversation today, I was thinking about somebody who's a really great example of this, who's a Gen Z collector, and his name is David Maxwell. He lives in Atwater Village, and he has a fantastic collection where it's floor to ceiling, very similar to this installation actually, where he's got some big artists like Takashi Murakami and Gina Beavers, but he also supports a lot of like the local young LA artists as well. And at his house, he's converted his garage into an artist residency that's called the Flower Residency. And he brings young artists to LA to spend a month living with him and making work and becoming a part of the community. And with these young collectors, specific like David and other Gen Z collectors and millennial collectors, one of the things that I've really noticed that I love is that they become a part of the artist community. They're not just coming to galleries and looking at work. They really love visiting artist studios. And when you hang out with them, you really can't even tell the difference between who's a collector and who's an artist. And I love that there's like this levelingness that happens, and it's so much about the community and supporting these young artists through creating a lot of connections. Like, for example, with David's residency, so many artists come together and they get to meet each other and build each other up that way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it segues nicely into our next question, because Monica, you are a millennial collector.
Millennial collector.
Yeah, you're somebody who started collecting not that long ago, but long enough that you have taste, you have artists you support. And we've talked a lot about exactly what Rachel alluded to, is like the relationships that you get to build with the artists and with the gallerists and with the community as a whole. So I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about when you started collecting, what factors did you consider, what expectations did you have, and then what surprised you and what is kind of most meaningful to you now as you're deeper into the collecting journey?
So I started collecting mostly graded comic books probably 10, 15 years ago. And then just through luck, I met some amazing people like Jenna, who kind of became my art Sherpas and explained to me, like how to ask for pricing and how to decide if it's what you want to pay for and how to cultivate your taste. When I first started collecting, I would say it was a little bit haphazard, only because my only question was, can I pay for it and do I want to wake up with it? So it was really important to me that like when I go home, I'm excited to see it, and when I wake up, I want it to be there. So I can see over the last 5-10 years that I can tell what in my apartment I bought earlier and what I bought more recently. In terms of what surprised me, my friends and I, we've always spent a lot of time and money and effort on things like membership clubs or like trying to find communities, especially in New York. And I did find it really interesting where like if I spent $5,000 at Soho House, you could go use the facility. But if I spent $5,000 on a piece, then you're their collector forever, and for the rest of their practice, they'll invite you to their stuff, right? So I was very pleasantly surprised at that kind of like community aspect. Sorry, what was the rest of your question? Okay.
I mean, I think that's a great answer. I think that's it. Is there any sort of like anything that you thought going into it was going to be important that hasn't been, or anything like that?
You know, I never buy assuming I'm going to sell it. So the appreciation was never quite a factor, but I did always text people and ask, like, what do you think of this artist, or what do you think of this gallery? And so personally, it just makes me feel better knowing that my stuff appreciates. So I think I was a little bit surprised at how much information they have. So I'm like, oh, in a different industry, this is called insider trading. But I guess here it's okay. So that kind of surprised me. But I guess I'm lucky enough to be on the receiving end. So.
No, I think that's actually good advice too. And also, people in the art industry love to talk. Like, we love to share the information we have.
Yeah.
And I think, reaching out to people and asking for their thoughts and opinions, you might find somebody who has totally different tastes than you, and that's its own issue.
Right.
But
I think I was also very confused at the beginning about the relationship between artists and galleries. Like, I don't think I understood that, like, you have to go to. I don't think I understood that you could just go to the artist, or that you have to go to the gallery, or what's what. So that relationship at the beginning was a little bit confusing to me.
Yeah. And it can vary drastically, gallery to gallery and artist to artist too. But Zina, then from a more institutional perspective, when you're trying to engage Gen Z and millennial collectors, or not collectors, I guess, patrons, people coming who are supporting the art, coming to see things at the institution, what do you notice about how they engage with the museum and how they engage with the work? Or is there a difference between how millennials and Gen Zs interact versus, say, older, previous generations?
First, thank you so much, Jenna. You have incredible questions. This is such a beautiful panel, and I'm so grateful that everyone came out to hear us speak on a torrential rain Friday, like at the end of an incredibly busy and packed week. And thank you so much for the invitation, Rachel. It's really exciting to be in conversation with everyone. A little bit about me and who I am kind of gives context to the work that I do. So I'm the Director of Development at Sculpture Center. Sculpture Center is a commissioning organization based in Long Island, Queens, where we commission new artists from around the world to have their first ever solo presentation in the United States. So I've been there for a little under 3 years. And before, I was at the Brooklyn Museum, where I managed the Council for African American Art, the Council for Feminist Art, and the Contemporary Art Committee. Before there, I managed young patrons at Creative Time, which is a small art nonprofit between the intersection of art and social justice. And then I moved to New York in 2015 to work for MoMA in the Major Gifts and Research Department at the time of the Capitol Campaign building. So patronage is something that is very near to me. Initially, when I was drawn to the arts, I thought I wanted to be a curator. So it's a very specific lens in which people work in that context. And it didn't really feel like that was my connection. But I had a really amazing mentors who shared with me that if you enjoy the curatorial aspect, there's part of it that, of how these things come to be conceived might be of interest to you. So then that set me on my path in fundraising. And I think specifically as I notice and spend more time in the industry, and I see the range and focus of patrons get closer to my own age, which is something that was very different when I started in this industry. We were looking for a very specific kind of patron and collector that would be engaged in New York City. And that kind of came to a boom and a bust really in 2020, where there were these massive calls for diverse trustees and this and the focus of women and all these different things that I thought as a researcher, we need to begin to start at the source. And where does that source begin? And that's with patron programs. Who are people who are in your orbit and in your ecosystem that come to every opening, that utilize their resources to support your exhibitions, to come to your galas, and to meet your artists, to be able to envision these incredible installations. So to me, I think what I notice more is it's from a community perspective, that I think it's people investing in a community they care about, like similar to what Monica's saying, similar to what Rachel's saying about folks who are raising their hand and saying that this is important to me and I want to sustain to make sure that this environment is here for years and years to come. So that's kind of how I think about it. That's a really broad way. I hope I touched upon it in some capacity, but that was my answer to that.
Yeah, that's great. So one thing that I was thinking about when we're thinking about Gen Z and when we're thinking about millennials, these are people who grew up with computers, they grew up with the internet, and they grew up with a certain level of access to information. And the art industry is historically very opaque. We like to keep information to ourselves. And so I'm wondering, this is an open question for all three panelists. How do you think Gen Z and millennials might shift the industry in terms of transparency, in terms of access to information and sharing that information even amongst themselves as collectors?
I've noticed, at least from the business side, there's been a lot of like new startups trying to fractionalize art ownership, or trying to, just have what do you call it, like new platforms, right? So things like Artsy, but the fractionalizing was interesting to me because I saw they started trying to do it with like, old baseball cards that are worth a lot of money or old comic books that are worth a lot of money. But I've been seeing more and more of it with art, actually. I don't know if I think that's a good thing or a bad thing, because to me, the reason why you buy art is because you want it. And so if you're just owning a piece of it, it's like you may as well just, I don't know, buy stock, like actual stock. But yeah, but that was something interesting that I've been kind of noticing.
Yeah, a new way to kind of participate.
Yeah.
When Rebecca Laliberte and I were starting Future Fair, this was something that we were toying around with this question a lot, and we were actually looking outside of the art world and seeing how, which was at the time 5 years ago, we were focusing more on this millennial generation, and we were looking at startups and how they were growing their consumer bases, and specifically startups that resonated with us. So one of those specifically was Away, was a brand new luggage company, and they were creating this brand that wasn't just about selling luggage, but selling the experience of travel. And they were doing a lot of storytelling and doing a lot of editorializing around their product. And that's one of like several other companies. Another one that we really liked was Everlane, which was also new back then. And for Everlane, it was so much about, if you buy this product, you're also buying into the values. And, for us as millennial consumers, these brands were resonating with us, but we also didn't see anyone in the art world that was taking that strategy and putting it into a commercial sense. So from Away, what we were inspired by was that storytelling, which Future Fair became really known for, especially during the pandemic when we had to be an online show. So we really ran with that, all the digital storytelling and editorializing of the artists. And we had a lot of fun doing that. And if you're on our newsletters or if you follow us on Instagram, you know that that's very much a hallmark of Future Fair. And also, we are very transparent about, the values that we have here and our focus on community building and our focus on, building a diverse group of artists and dealers and collectors. And this also really resonates with millennial and Gen Z collectors. You want to feel like you see yourself in the spaces. You want to create spaces that also feel really welcoming to these generations. So that was a lot of how our approach began and where we're thinking in terms of moving forward.
I think that's really interesting too. Also then from the dealer side, one of the things that I've really loved about Future Fair is every time I've done it, I've worked collaboratively with another gallery. And so Future Fair has encouraged that and made it possible in a way that other fairs maybe aren't as amenable to or as open to. And so that has allowed me in each iteration to co-curate with somebody else, to present work collectively of their work, their artists and my artists. And so we're kind of able to tap into both networks, and we're able to kind of work together. And I think as a millennial art dealer, as maybe the next generation of art dealers, there is this sense that the industry needs to change and nobody's sort of figured out how it's going to. And so we have these things like fractional ownership, we have the online platforms, we have a lot of these things that are looking towards tech. But I personally think there also needs to be kind of maybe a culture shift. And I think Future Fair is really a leader in that space in terms of like it does I meet so many people at this fair, and it feels really collegiate. It feels really like we're getting together. I know Rachel and Rebecca personally, and I can't say that I have that at every other fair. So I think that's also something too that maybe might appeal to the younger collectors who are trying to navigate an industry that really has tended to exclude people and try to find a way to, break into it. Okay. So do you guys have what excites you most currently? Like, what are you most excited about in the art market? Whether that's maybe a particular artist or work or something that's shifting or changing. What are you excited about?
So I'm really, really excited about the institutional shows that are on view right now. I have lived in New York since 2015, and I feel so fortunate to be able to exist with so much of world-class art at my fingertips. Like, it's truly a gift and a blessing. And I think when I see the work that's being done by Sculpture Center and also fellow institutions right now, it's really beautiful. Like, I was taken aback by the Amy Sherrill show at the Whitney. The fact that in 2025, Amy Sherrill is receiving her first career spectrum is just really interesting and dynamic to me. Rashid Johnson at the Guggenheim, to see that work and so much of his early practice that I personally have never seen. And he had a Sculpture Center show in 2011. There's works from that exhibition that are in the exhibition now, so it's so incredible to see. Or what we do in Queens. Like, Queens is the most diverse borough in the world. The most languages spoken per capita are in Queens, and we're located in Long Island City. So the focus of our program being international is a very specific choice, so that dialogue exists in New York at this time. So we're showing an artist currently from Minas Gerais, Brazil. Her name is Luana Vitra. This is her first ever exhibition in the United States, and she's building on a residency that she did in South Africa. So there's a lot of these elements of the beading and the work that come out of this. And we also have a publication, which will be her first ever English language publication of the work. So the first time this work will be received by English audiences will be through the scholarship and the work of this exhibition. So I think institutions are large seismic things that have very complicated and precarious histories. But I think if we can use them as tools to create very diverse and different conversations, I think that excites me. It excites me as someone who's worked very long in this field and can feel discouraged by it and can feel maligned or forgotten. I think what really excites me is just the fact that there's so many colleagues and so many of us who have worked in this space for a very long time and have wanted to see better, and when it comes, we should acknowledge it when it arrives. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah.
I think the thing I'm excited about is probably much more like personal, maybe selfish. Like I mentioned, I can feel my taste changing, and I think that things like Future Fair and institutional exhibits, right, just being able to have access to it and just see lots of stuff in a really short amount of space and time has helped me a lot. And so it's exciting to kind of discover, like, what do I want in my world next? The other thing that I'm excited about is really like my group of friends. Like, I live in an 800 square foot studio, so it's just a box, and I keep having to hang everything higher and higher. But whenever people come over, for years, I was always like, you should get stuff too. And a lot of them, most people are renters, and, so their first thing is always like, I don't own this. I don't want to spend money on making it nicer. But I do feel like more and more of them understand that, like, well, you still live there, and it's still your life, and you still have to wake up and look at something, right, or nothing. But so it's exciting to me to see my friends, even if they haven't pulled the trigger quite yet, some of them, that they're actually interested and they have questions, and they'll, tag along with me to things like this. And they're also kind of developing their own taste. So I think that's fun. Yeah.
Such a good question. I think, thinking about being a young collector, and I myself am one, and I'm thinking about how we want to grow this audience is how cool it is that artists reflect the diverse interests that we ourselves have. Mm-hmm. And for me as a collector, And for me as an individual, as somebody that's, I have a personal interest in mythology and decolonization, and those are things that I'm interested in, in my personal life. But then when I am finding artists, especially artists that are of my own like Filipino diaspora, that are interested in these as well, it's so exciting to support these young artists and bring them into my home. And then when people get to visit, my home and see these artists' works, they're not just learning about this artist and their story. My story is an extension of them as well. And I think one of the most exciting things about being a part of our generation of collectors is that we really understand that. We're really interested in supporting our community of artists and really growing us from, through across, like really growing across and not just being like, oh, it's like a hierarchical ladder.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really excited also about working with young artists or artists who are earlier in their careers. So to Zina's point, like to have shown work by Rashid Johnson that now you get to see at the Guggenheim, like it's really fun to see these artists grow. And when you get to be one of the first shepherds of their work and then, 10, 15, 20 years later, get to see these things again in different spaces. There's something so exciting about that, that continued story and the little tiny parts we get to play in it. So to kind of close out, and then we'll go to questions and conversations. My final question is there anything that you think we should be doing, and Monica, from the collector side, to make art, and also from art buying, I think it's important to engage the collecting part of this, make art buying feel more approachable for the younger generation? And then Zina, same question, and Rachel, then from a fair point of view, are there any strategies? And alongside that, is there any advice you hadn't been given when you started to get into the art world that you think would be still valuable to this younger generation?
I think the main thing that I think is for everything, not just art buying, is like exposure brings comfort. So the more you're exposed to anything, then you're just more okay with it, and you're more comfortable with it, and you're more confident around it. So in terms of engaging new buyers or younger buyers, just creating situations where they are exposed to the artwork itself, they're exposed to the artists, they're exposed to the dealers. And then so what was the second part of your question?
Was there any advice that that you wish you'd been given?
I did not know is that framing is really expensive and it changes it a lot. Yeah. Like a crappy frame will ruin the piece, and I had no idea it was so expensive. So that's something that I wish I knew from the beginning.
That's good and very practical. Yeah. Zina, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love what Monica said about exposure brings comfort. I think that's such a good antidote. And also, I think another thing too, when I think of access, I think of information and the free flowing of information and how people learn about who we are and what we do. And I think one of the things that we do at Sculpture Center is we've really envisioned our patron circles in a way, so these fundraising groups, to directly support our bottom line. So we have two specific patron circles. So we have the International Council, which supports our work from artists outside of the States. And then we have the Curators Council, which supports the work of our new curator, Giovanna Venegas, who joined us from SF MoMA a little bit over a year ago. So it's very tangible, and our entry points are very accessible, which is something that I think, after spending a really long time working in different structures or larger institutions and smaller institutions of size, and seeing how patronage and supporting institutions was mostly through the benefit of exclusivity. One of the things that we wanted to think about is who are the people who are closely involved in the mission and the work that we do, and how can we convene around these ideas where everyone can feel valuable in the way that they can show up. So that also means that the financial constraints as well. So an entry point to get involved at Sculpture Center is $2,500, and that allows people to operate in a way where they can make an investment that feels rewarding and helpful to them. So we have a very interesting and dynamic flexibility that was something when I envisioned these circles after my time at larger places I really wanted to instill. So I feel like another way that we really think holistically about who is in our space and as stewards of this. We're located in a former trolley repair shop that is that was opened in 1906, and we were founded in 1928. So we're almost a 100-year institution that I think as we are the stewards of it in this moment, our openings are always free and open to the public. We have no cost of admission. So in order to come and receive the guests and the people that want to be in our space, financial constraints shouldn't be an issue. So I think there's a lot of specific decisions that you have to envision and decide as a fundraiser that makes that incredibly precarious at times. But I think we've really been, and I think what I'm so excited is to see consistency in building something over time. And that's why I'm so inspired by Future Fair, because to see something over the course of 5 years and how it grows and how it flexes and what it needs at different times is something I'm really interested in. So I think that's also a journey that a lot of our community wants to go on with us. We're a really young team as well. Like, we're all kind of in the millennial generation that we're speaking of. So our director, Sohrab Mehevi, he was on the Art 100 Powerless under 40 last year. He was the last curator of the Carnegie International. So this really forward and well-known biennial that happens at the Carnegie Institute every other year. And then we've just been really intentional in the way that we've been envisioning these spaces. So we have a crazy sub-level basement that we throw parties in. So if you would like to come, please let me know. We do really interesting and dynamic things that we're able to explore with artists at really unique times in their practice, which I feel like because that energy is there, it has to reverberate in all aspects of what we do.
That's great.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Zina. Getting involved with an institution is such a great entry point. I highly suggest it. I moved to LA a couple years ago, and part of the ways that I've wanted to get involved and learn more about my new city of a home is I've joined two groups, the Hammer Collective and also the Angelino Collective, which is part of the ICALA. Both institutions are so fantastic. They do great programming for young art patrons, and we get to do studio visits together, and we get to see special art exhibitions, and you get to build community, meet artists, and it's in a very comfortable environment. It's a really great entry point. So I'd say that. And then additionally, I have a friend who I was just speaking with earlier this morning. His name's Will Tamita. He just moved to Wellington, Florida, which is near West Palm Beach. He has a really wonderful collection. And he'll have his friends. He was coincidentally just having friends over for dinner parties, and then they were seeing the artwork on his walls and really getting to experience art outside of just going to a museum or gallery. Be like, oh wow, you live with this artist, this and that, and they were not from an art world background, but now they're like, can you help me buy art? And so I think that exposure, like you were saying, of seeing how much value art gives when it's in your everyday life, and then having that personal bridge of a connection. I think those are all really key parts of this, of growing this consumer base.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with everything you guys have mentioned. I also think one thing that Gen Z and millennials are interested in is kind of the social component. Like, it's nice when there's drinks. It's nice when there's a time to chat. As much as we're thrilled that you're sitting here and listening to us just talk at you, it's a little bit more fun when you get to participate a little bit. And so, to that end, I'm the sponsor of this panel is Juniper Society, which is a private members group that's really focused on the experience of the art world. And they bring members to 2 events a month in spaces where art is available and accessible. And so there's no pressure to buy, but there is always art that is technically available, because I think we interact with it differently at an institution versus a studio versus a fair versus a gallery. And so to have that immediacy is really nice. And it's very social. There's always beverages with and without alcohol, and a chance to chat.
Member. I can vouch. It's fun.
Monica is a member. Yes, exactly. And yeah, you get to interact with the artist or the gallerist, and then start to build your own network in the art space. So when you have a question, like Monica said, and you wonder who can I text about, hey, is this broken? Does it need to be repaired? Is somebody trying to sell me a broken sculpture? Or is it supposed to look like this? All of a sudden you have the person that you can text and ask that question to. And so I think, yeah, a little bit, especially in New York, we're starved for community a little bit. And you were saying artists are experiencing what we're experiencing. And I think often they do a lot of the work of cultural translation for us. Like we're all dealing with what's coming at us all the time, and artists are processing it and giving something back to us then that we can kind of have a lens to look through what we're experiencing. And so to be able to meet them and have this direct relationship, I think is really nice, and I think something that I'm sure all generations of collectors appreciate, but in this moment, millennials and Gen Zs as well. But to that end, I'd like to turn it over. Are there any comments, questions? Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, ladies. My name is Paulina. I have a gallery in Detroit, and I have a two-part question. We do focus on emerging artists, and in our market, there's a lot of art enthusiasts, and they're all in this age demographic. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on converting art enthusiasts, which are a majority of the people who come to our openings and our events, which are really well attended, and the conversion to collecting. And this conversation has been really happening in the city and among other galleries because there are suburbs and older generations of collectors in the city, but there's younger people in the city and in the community about some ideas for events or other ways that might be able to educate, and what kind of formats, what would be maybe some suggestions that you think would be engaging for that kind of
I'm just saying, so I actually work for a tech company, and I know that like when I sit with our CRO for like our sales pipeline meetings, it is kind of like when I talk to my friends and try to convince them to buy something. I think a large part of it is just breaking down any excuses. So it's like I will come over with a ladder and a level and help you install it. I'll help you out, I'll help you pick where it goes. I'll help you do the framing. And then I think it's being really brutal about like the Venn diagram of people who want it, will pay for it, have the money, and are close to pulling the trigger, and just kind of ignoring the people that don't fall into that Venn diagram.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing too is like, I do think it's important to offer a wide variety of price points. I mean, as a gallerist, I know I can't pay my rent selling pieces for $100, but I do think that when I have the opportunity to sell those, I do sell quite a few of them. And you are engaging this person who's getting their first little dopamine hit of like, oh, okay, I get to own this piece of art. And then when they come back and they see that artist showing again, but there's only pieces for $5,000 available, then there's this kind of, and I mean, certainly they would be different pieces, but there's this kind of like, oh, I'm a part of this because I do have this one little, and maybe it's editioned and maybe it's, whatever it is, but they have that. And so there's sort of that thing. And I have a theory, I don't know if it's played out in reality yet, but when people are really nervous about getting their first tattoo and then they get it and then all of a sudden they have 35 tattoos, I think buying art is a little bit like that. And I had that experience myself. I didn't grow up in an art family. I didn't grow up in a big city, so it was never part of my life. And the first time I bought art, I really, really thought about it. And then I bought it, and then I really thought about it some more, like, oh my gosh, did I make a mistake? And I didn't want to seem stupid. I didn't want to seem like I had been tricked. And now that I've bought a few pieces of art, you don't care. It just kind of becomes part of that practice. It's like that first one, and you can kind of hook people in. And so I think like the affordability is part of it. And then, finding ways. We offer payment plans, for example. And to Monica's point, any of these barriers to say, I fully understand this is a big purchase. Here's why it's exciting. And sometimes I'll point to a collector like Monica and say, she bought her first piece. At this point, it was...
Which I actually hate now, because the artist turned out to be kind of a weirdo. Hidden in my closet.
Right. Yes. And that's the other thing too, is it's okay to make mistakes. Like we're willing to spend money on shoes. We're willing to spend money on dinners that we happen for one night. We're willing to spend money on travel, which I think all those things are valuable, and I'm spending money on them myself. But we don't we don't lose sleep over the fact that we've spent $50 on a meal that turned out to not be that good. And we do that a lot of times in our lives. And so I think there is this fear that if you don't buy the perfect piece and it doesn't end up at a Sotheby's evening sale someday, you've done it wrong. But really, it's the experience. It's like meeting the artist, meeting the dealer, having this time in between. And that's worth $1,000. That's worth $800. It's worth maybe even $10,000. Depending on where you are financially. But I don't know if any of that resonates. Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
We'll be around to talk.
Yeah, we'll be here and happy to talk and give cards or anything.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.